1954 was a year of seismic shifts in America, a moment when the nation's soul-searching over race collided with its ambition to lead the free world. Three events would forever intertwine: the Supreme Court's Brown versus Board of Education ruling, Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie's state visit, and his repatriation program for Black Americans. But beneath these milestones lay a hidden thread: the Cold War's shadow and the Eisenhower administration's calculated efforts to mold civil rights into a weapon of diplomacy. Today, we uncover a pivotal piece of this puzzle: President Eisenhower's amicus brief to the Supreme Court, a document that reveals how the White House quietly steered the Brown decision to serve its global agenda. To grasp the urgency of 1954, we must first confront the Cold War's ideological battleground. The United States and Soviet Union weren't just competing for military dominance, they were fighting for moral authority. Soviet propaganda seized on America's Achilles heel: Jim Crow. Newspapers like Pravda splashed headlines about segregated schools and lynchings, asking newly independent nations in Africa and Asia, is this America's democracy? The State Department grew desperate. In 1953, a confidential memo warned that segregation was handicapping our leadership abroad. U.S. diplomats cringed as African delegates faced humiliating discrimination in Washington hotels. The Global South, fresh from colonialism, watched closely. America's racial hypocrisy wasn't just a moral failure, it was a geopolitical crisis. Enter President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Publicly, he maintained a cautious neutrality on civil rights, wary of alienating Southern Democrats. Privately, his administration orchestrated a legal intervention that would tip the scales of history. In December 1952, the Justice Department, under Eisenhower's Attorney General Herbert Brownell, filed an amicus curiae, friend of the court brief in the Brown case. This 58-page document became the White House's quiet manifesto. The brief's arguments were revolutionary. It declared school segregation unconstitutional. Yes, but its most striking passages framed the issue as a national security imperative. Racial discrimination furnishes grist for the communist propaganda mills. It warned, noting that Soviet broadcasts exploited U.S. racism to diminish the prestige of our nation. The brief cited damning examples. Indonesian students refused service in D.C. Indian diplomats barred from Texas restaurants. Crucially, it argued that segregation undermined America's ability to win allies in the decolonizing world. This was no abstract legal theory. The brief's language mirrored State Department cables and CIA reports. For the first time, the executive branch had formally linked civil rights to Cold War survival, and the Supreme Court took note. On May 17, 1954, Chief Justice Earl Warren read the unanimous verdict: separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. The ruling was a triumph for the NAACP's legal team, led by Thurgood Marshall. But behind the scenes, Eisenhower's amicus brief had laid the groundwork. Justice Department lawyers had even attended closed-door court sessions, emphasizing the international stakes. The timing was no accident. The decision landed just 9 days before Emperor Haile Selassie's arrival, a visit the State Department had meticulously planned. Internal memos show officials scrambling to avoid incidents during Selassie's tour, aware that any racial snub would fuel Soviet narratives. The Brown ruling, broadcast globally via Voice of America, became America's answers to the critics. See, we are changing. Yet, the administration's motives were starkly pragmatic. As Eisenhower later confided to aides, the Supreme Court decision will set us back 15 years in the South, but for international reasons, it had to be done. Emperor Haile Selassie's May 1954 tour was a masterclass in Cold War theater. The U.S. rolled out the red carpet, a White House state dinner, a ticker tape parade in New York, and a speech at Howard University where Selassie hailed Brown as a beacon of justice. Newspapers like the Chicago Defender showcased black officials and diplomats, a staged rebuttal to Soviet claims of American apartheid. But the pageantry masked tensions. Just weeks earlier, the Ethiopian embassy had lodged complaints after Selassie's staff faced segregation in Maryland. The State Department, armed with the Brown ruling, assured the emperor that America was evolving. Privately, they exhaled. The decision had arrived just in time. Amid this diplomatic dance, Selassie advanced his own vision: repatriation. Since the 1940s, Ethiopia had offered Black Americans land in Shashemane, a lush region symbolizing Pan-African unity. By 1954, the program promised free passage, citizenship, and salaries, a stark alternative to America's slow march toward integration. The timing was provocative, as Brown dominated headlines. Black leaders debated their future. Malcolm X, then rising in the Nation of Islam, praised repatriation as a return to our roots. Meanwhile, Thurgood Marshall dismissed it, declaring, "Our fight is here." Selassie, ever the diplomat, walked both paths, publicly applauding Brown while quietly offering an escape hatch from Jim Crow. The Brown decision's global acclaim masked its domestic fragility. Southern states defied the ruling, shuttering schools and inciting violence. By 1956, 101 congressmen signed the Southern Manifesto, vowing resistance. Soviet media pounced, mocking America's paper equality. Yet, Eisenhower's amicus brief had achieved its goal. Brown became a Cold War trophy. When the Little Rock crisis erupted in 1957, Eisenhower reluctantly sent troops, citing the need to uphold the dignity of the United States in the eyes of the world. The global audience, as always, loomed large. The story of 1954 is one of paradox. Brown versus the Board of Education was both a moral victory and a calculated diplomatic maneuver. Eisenhower's amicus brief, The Smoking Gun, exposes how Cold War pragmatism shaped civil rights progress. Selassie's visit, meanwhile, revealed America's duality. A nation hosting a black emperor with one hand while clinging to segregation with the other. The repatriation program, though limited, endures as a testament to Pan-African resilience. For some, it symbolized hope. For others, a reminder that equality in America remained conditional. Today, we grapple with the echoes of 1954. Was Brown a triumph of justice or a geopolitical maneuver? Did Eisenhower's brief uplift civil rights or exploit them? And what does it mean that progress for Black Americans hinged on global optics, not moral conviction? These questions haunt our current struggles. They remind us that the fight for equality is never just local. It is always watched, weaponized, and woven into the fabric of power. In 1954, the Cold War forced America to confront its sins. The lesson endures. True justice requires more than a verdict. It demands a reckoning.